The night cut like broken glass. Boston's streets lay hollowed by cold, the kind of cold that crept into your lungs and made even headlights seem brittle. Dr. Michael Thomas gripped the steering wheel with tired fingers. The hospital shift had drained what little life he carried inside. 12 hours of fevers, fractures, and one bruised little boy, whose silence said more than any X-ray ever could. He hadn't meant to be here. A closed highway and a lazy GPS reroute had funneled him into a crumbling neighborhood where flickering street lamps lit patches of worn concrete and rusted chain-link fences. Then motion, a flicker of shadow on shadow. Michael braked instinctively. A figure shifted in the beam, too low for a person, too solid for trash. His heart quickened, a shape with muscle, purpose. He stepped out into the freezing dark, the snow stinging like needles. The wind took his breath the way grief used to. Then came the growl, low, coarse, protective. The beam of his flashlight landed on a German shepherd, broad-chested, hackles bristling, teeth bared, eyes glowing like moons. Its body was stone, still not poised to strike, but planted like a wall. Then from beneath the beast, a cry, so faint it barely touched the air. But Michael knew that sound. The trembling, instinctual gasp of a newborn. He'd heard it too many times, first breaths, last ones, and everything in between. There, nestled between the dog's legs, was a bundle. Blue blanket, tiny fist exposed to the air, the fingers tinged with early blue. The child was dying, and the dog. The dog was shielding her from the wind. Its body angled into the alley's cruel draft, creating a cocoon of fur and breath. Michael dropped to one knee. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." He whispered, his voice gentler than it had been in years. "I'm a doctor." The dog didn't move, didn't flinch, but it didn't lunge either. The baby whimpered again, weaker now. And as snow thickened around them, the doctor, the dog, and the child formed a strange sacred triangle in the night. Not rescue yet, not survival, but a silent understanding. Life still had a chance. Michael kept his body low, movements slow, every breath careful. The dog's eyes never left him. Each inch he crawled forward felt like crossing into a war zone made of fur and fangs. But the baby's silence screamed louder than any threat. Her cry was gone now. He shifted his flashlight down again. The infant's chest moved, but barely. Frost clung to the edges of her lips. The blanket, thin and damp, had done little. It was the heat of the dog, this strange, silent sentinel, that had kept her alive. "I need to help her," Michael murmured. Not for the dog, for himself, for whatever part of him had died 3 winters ago when he buried Amanda. And the child he never held. A snarl answered him, not a threat, but a warning. Still, he reached for his phone with glacial care, not breaking eye contact. 1-1, he breathed when the call connected. "This is Dr. Michael Thomas. I've found an abandoned newborn in an alley off Dorchester. A large German shepherd is guarding her. Both are alive, but barely." The dispatcher's voice buzzed in his ear as he gave cross streets, described the scene, the baby's condition. "And send animal control," he added, voice hardening. "But tell them the dog isn't hostile. It's protecting her." He ended the call. Back in the alley, the snowfall thickened. The ground soaked through his knees. The cold reached bone. The dog shivered barely but didn't move. Its body remained wrapped around the child like a living shield. Michael grabbed his emergency blanket from the car, showed it to the dog from a distance. "This will help her. I promise." Still no reaction, but no attack either. He placed it gently on the ground, then stepped back. And then for the first time, the dog looked down at the infant, looked back at Michael. Something passed between them. Not permission, but something softer. surrender. Hope. Michael moved in, wrapped the child, feeling the faintest warmth against his palm. The dog growled low, but didn't intervene. Sirens pierced the night. Help was coming, but it had already arrived. By morning, the hospital buzzed like a shaken hive. The infant, now nicknamed Angel by nurses, lay swaddled in warmth and wires. Her color had returned. Her breath was stable. And the German Shepherd guardian, they called her, had taken root like furniture, refusing to leave the child's side. Every time Angel whimpered, the dog's ears twitched. Every time a nurse entered, Guardian stood alert, watching. Not aggressive, not calm. Something in between, like duty, given form. Michael hovered near the glass, running on black coffee and adrenaline. He hadn't left. Couldn't. Not with the child lying there. Not with that dog watching her the way Amanda had once looked at their son's ultrasound, like she'd already memorized him. The media found them by noon. A leaked photo. A viral headline. Hero dog guards abandoned newborn in snowstorm. The story spread faster than frost. Crowdfunding pages popped up. Commenters argued whether the mother was a monster or martyr. Some wept, some raged. Everyone had something to say. No one knew the full truth. That afternoon, Detective Eleanor Jenkins arrived. Professional, curious. She took Michael's report, but her eyes kept drifting to the glass, to Guardian, to Angel, to the way they belonged. Someone must have seen something, she murmured. That dog isn't random. She was guarding the baby, not just near her. Michael nodded. She made a windbreak with her body. Jenkins looked at him. That's not instinct, she said. That's intent. Across town, police canvassed neighborhoods, flashing photos of Angel and Guardian at shelters, clinics, corner stores. Cameras from gas stations were pulled. Footage reviewed. No mother. No lead. The blanket generic. The onesie common. No ID. No chip. No trace. Yet the story only grew. They were symbols now, the baby, the dog, and the doctor. A trinity for a nation hungry for something good, something fierce, something loyal. Behind it all, Michael paced the hospital corridor, like a man walking the edge of something bigger than grief. Not healing, not yet, but the fragile root of it. A life had been left in the snow, but now it had roots, and eyes watching, and a name, Angel, and Guardian. On the fourth day, bureaucracy arrived. Margaret Winters. Tight bun. Tighter tone. A clipboard wielded like a weapon. She informed the hospital that Angel was medically cleared for discharge and would be placed with a certified foster family. Guardian would be transferred to animal services for standard adoption procedures. Michael didn't speak at first. He looked through the nursery window. The baby was asleep. Guardian lay curled at the foot of her bassinet tail, flicking gently, eyes half-lidded but alert. The bond was wordless, but it was there, pulsing, real. They should stay together, he said. Ms. Winters barely blinked. That's not how the system works, Dr. Thomas. No, he said, quieter. That's the problem. It wasn't logic. It wasn't science. It was something older, the memory of Guardian growling in the snow, refusing to let Angel go. Separation now would be another wound, another abandonment, and Michael had seen enough of those. Dr. Cohen, the hospital director, stepped in. She had pulled strings before. She could do it again. What if there were another option, she asked. A pause. A look. Then a temporary joint guardianship. Ms. Winters' jaw stiffened. He isn't a foster parent. He hasn't been certified. No home inspection. No classes. But he's the one who found them. He's the one who hasn't left her side, Dr. Cohen countered. And he's the only one insisting the baby and dog remain together. Michael said nothing. He stared at his hands, the same hands that had wrapped Angel in a thermal blanket that had once buried a wedding ring. Could he do this? Could he become something again? The judge granted it. Emergency guardianship, strict conditions, weekly inspections, parenting courses. The arrangement would end the moment Angel's birth family was found. But until then, Michael was no longer just a doctor. He was something else, something he didn't yet have a word for. That night, he stood in his apartment measuring the space between his bookshelf and couch. It was cold, sterile, a place built for forgetting. Now it needed to become something new. He ordered a crib, installed monitors, bought formula, and in the corner, he laid out a bed for a dog who already knew how to love. Michael's apartment was too quiet when they arrived. The baby light as breath in his arms, the dog heel-bound and patient. The hallway echoed with every step. He unlocked the door, unsure if he was letting them into his home or if they were pulling him into theirs. Angel stirred as he placed her in the crib, her fingers uncurling like flower petals in the warmth. Guardian immediately lay beside the crib, her head resting just inches from the base. She didn't whine. She didn't move. She simply watched. Michael stood in the doorway longer than necessary. It was the first time in years that silence didn't feel like grief. Days blurred into feeding schedules and diaper changes. His hands, once used for stitching wounds and setting bones, now fumbled formula measurements. But Angel didn't care. She gurgled and kicked, and Guardian remained her quiet companion. The dog was extraordinary. She seemed to know before Angel cried. She'd nudge Michael awake, then sit watchfully through each bottle, each bath, each uncertain, new ritual. She wasn't just present, she was with her. Fully, utterly. Michael had a dog trainer evaluate her. The verdict: professional-grade training layered over deep emotional intelligence. She's bonded, the trainer said simply. Not just obedient, invested. Michael wasn't sure what surprised him more, the depth of the dog's devotion, or the fact that he had become part of it. At night, he dreamt of Amanda. Not in the way he used to, not the hollow replay of sirens and snow and screaming brakes. No. She came to him smiling now. Curious, watching him hold a baby, watching him fumble through bottles and formula and lullabies. And in the dream, she wasn't afraid. In the dream, she nodded. 1 week after that snow-soaked alley, Angel and Guardian were no longer a news headline. They were in his home, in his care. And when the knock came, a call from the detective, a possible lead. Michael froze. He looked down at Angel sleeping soundly. He looked at Guardian, who lifted her head and watched him like she already knew. And somewhere deep in his gut, something whispered, "They might not be yours for long, but they're yours now." The lead came from a grainy pharmacy camera. A woman mid-20s purchasing newborn supplies, just blocks from where Angel had been found. With her, a German shepherd, unmistakable, even in low resolution. Guardian. Michael stared at the image on his phone, heart lurching. The timeline fit. The location. The gait of the woman beside the dog. But no name, no address. Just the chill of inevitability. Detective Jenkins warned him. This might move fast. Be ready. Ready. He wasn't sure what that meant anymore. He had baby wipes in the kitchen, a dog bed in the living room, tiny onesies folded where old textbooks used to sit. And still he wasn't ready. 3 days later, headlines exploded. Mother surrenders in miracle baby case. Sarah Mitchell, 26, former pediatric nurse. No criminal record, no family support. She turned herself in, accompanied by an attorney, and a silence thick with consequence. The world didn't wait for explanations. Commentators branded her a monster. Crowds demanded jail. Posters outside the courthouse read, "No mercy for mom." But inside the hospital, Michael felt something else. Confusion. Intrigue. A tremor of recognition he couldn't quite place. They arranged a meeting, supervised, clinical, uncomfortable. Michael brought Angel. Sarah entered in shackles. She looked exhausted. Hollow. Like someone trying to survive her own bones. But when Angel was placed in her arms, her face collapsed. No theatrics, no speeches, just a breathless stillness, the kind only mothers carry. "I never wanted to leave her," she whispered. "I just couldn't see any other way." Michael didn't respond. Couldn't. But when she asked, "How is Star?" and he realized Guardian was her dog, named for the star-shaped patch on her chest, something shifted. He described how the dog had never left Angel's side, how she barked when the baby cried, how she had stood in the snow and saved a life. Sarah smiled. The first real smile since her surrender. She was a rescue dog once, she said. Looks like she still is. That night, Michael lay awake with Angel's tiny breath beside him, and Guardian curled at the foot of the crib. Outside, the city raged in headlines and hashtags. But in this small room, life simply went on fragile, quiet, warm. The courtroom pulsed with heat and judgment. Michael sat behind the rows of lawyers and whispering press. Angel left in trusted arms back at the hospital. Guardian curled faithfully beneath the crib. This wasn't a trial yet, just a hearing. But already it felt like a verdict. Sarah Mitchell looked nothing like the villain the world had conjured. No wild hair, no defiance. Just a woman stripped down to the bones of consequence. Pale, hollow, human. The charges were brutal: child endangerment, abandonment, reckless conduct. Each word struck like a hammer. The crowd outside cheered their reading. Inside, Sarah barely blinked. When called to testify, Michael kept his answers clinical. He described the snow, the temperature, the way the baby's fingers were already turning blue. He explained how Guardian had blocked the wind and used her body to keep the child alive. And then, unprompted, he said, "But it didn't feel like abandonment." A hush. He continued, "The baby wasn't discarded. She was positioned to be found, shielded, guarded. Someone left her there. But someone also made sure she didn't die." The judge raised an eyebrow. The prosecutor frowned. Sarah's attorney said nothing. But Sarah looked up for the first time and met Michael's eyes, not pleading, just seeing. In the days that followed, everything sharpened. Sarah's public defender painted a picture of desperation, eviction, no food, postpartum depression. A woman spiraling alone, convinced her child would suffer more by staying than by leaving. The prosecution struck back hard. She knew of safe havens, hospitals, police stations. Why a snow-covered alley with only a dog? Sarah's voice cracked when she answered, "Because I trusted her. Star. I knew she wouldn't leave my baby. I thought she'd get someone's attention. I just didn't have the strength to stay." It wasn't a perfect defense, but it wasn't a lie either. Michael left court feeling gutted. Justice, he realized, was never clean. Not here, not now. Angel was safe. Guardian was healing. But the woman who'd sparked it all, she wasn't a villain, just a mother who had run out of choices. The world outside the courtroom had made up its mind. Sarah was a criminal, or a victim, or a symbol. Depending on the hour, she was either damned or defended. Her face turned into headlines, hashtags, and talking points. But inside Michael's apartment, none of that mattered. Because inside, Angel giggled when Guardian licked her toes. Inside, bottles were warmed and lullabies hummed, and Michael learned slowly how to be needed again. And then came the offer. Richard and Diana Blackwood, wealthy, polished, smiling in their press release as they offered Sarah the best legal team money could buy in exchange for the right to adopt Angel. A promise of private schools, summer estates, and yes, even a place for Guardian. "They're trying to buy her," Michael muttered, stunned. But it was worse than that, because 3 days later he came home to find his door ajar. Inside, a shaken babysitter, a furious Guardian, and Angel unharmed, but watched over by teeth and growls, and the kind of devotion you couldn't train. The intruder had posed as maintenance, had credentials, had gotten close. Too close. Michael reported everything. To the police, to Detective Jenkins, to Dr. Cohen. The pattern was clear now. The Blackwoods wanted Angel, and they weren't waiting for a courtroom to decide. They see her as a prize, Jenkins warned, not a person. Michael believed her. And worse, he believed they wouldn't stop. So he fortified his life. He installed alarms, cameras, took Angel to the hospital during his shifts, trusted only a handful of staff. Guardian never left her side, not even for a moment. It was strange, surreal, a pediatrician guarding a baby from billionaires, a dog standing between a child and a world that saw her as a story. And through it all, Sarah remained behind bars, awaiting trial, asking again and again only one question: are they still together? When Jenkins told her yes, that the dog and the baby were still safe, still side by side, she smiled. The first smile since she surrendered. The trial began under camera lenses and courtroom sketches. 3 months had passed since the alley. Angel was no longer a fragile wisp. She kicked, now smiled, now reached for Guardian's fur with tiny fists. Michael somehow had become a father in all but name. And Guardian. Guardian was still the quiet shadow at their feet. But now everything hung on words. Sarah Mitchell took the stand. Gone was the collapsed woman from her booking photo. In her place stood someone still haunted, still raw, but no longer running. She spoke of her job loss, her eviction, her hunger, the heater that hadn't worked in weeks. She spoke of her baby's cries and her own echoing in the dark. She didn't cry as she told it. The courtroom cried for her. I didn't know what else to do, she said. But I knew Star would never leave her, that she'd keep her warm. I thought I'd watch, just long enough to see someone find them. But when the headlights came, I panicked. I ran. The prosecutor cut through sympathy like ice. You were aware of Massachusetts' safe haven laws, weren't you? Yes. And yet, you chose an alley. Sarah's voice was barely audible. I wasn't thinking clearly. The prosecutor's voice rose. You left a newborn in 17-degree weather. With a dog. Sarah didn't flinch. With Star, she corrected. Then came Michael's turn. He described the scene. The dog's stance. The baby's condition. But when asked if it felt like abandonment, he said, no, it felt like faith. He described Guardian's behavior, her positioning, the way she blocked the wind, how she growled only when someone came too close, and the way she let him wrap the baby once she saw the blanket. Dogs don't do that unless they've been told to, he said. She was guarding, actively, and without that dog, the defense asked, would the child have survived? Michael's answer was absolute. No, not a chance. The room was still after that. The law dealt in facts, but lives lived in the space between them. The courtroom didn't breathe when Sarah stepped down. Everyone had heard the words, the testimony about desperation, warmth, survival, but no one knew what to do with them. Guilt wasn't gone, but neither was the truth. Michael returned to the witness box the next day for final questioning. This time, the defense focused on the bond, not between mother and child, but between child and dog. Dr. Thomas, Sarah's attorney, began. You've lived with both the infant and the dog for several months now. Have you seen signs of preparation, of training? Michael nodded. The dog responds to specific cries. She positions herself between the child and perceived threats. It's not chance. It's care. And that behavior, it didn't just begin when you brought them home, did it? No. It started that night in the alley. The defense leaned in. So the dog wasn't acting on instinct. Michael looked across the courtroom. Sarah watched him, not pleading, just present. No, he said. She was following orders from someone she trusted. Outside, the world spun faster than justice. Petitions, opinion pieces, people screaming for mercy, people screaming for punishment. And then something unexpected. A shift, a change in tone. Not in law, but in hearts. Because people began to see not just what Sarah had done, but why. They saw a woman who had lost everything, and yet somehow still arranged the only safety she could. They saw a doctor who had become a guardian, and a dog who never stopped being one. The prosecution closed with cold precision. Postpartum or not, they argued, she chose an alley over a hospital, a risk over certainty, a dog over people. But the defense closed with something else. She made the wrong choice, they admitted, but not with the wrong heart. The judge would take days to deliver a verdict. But for Michael, one thing was already clear. This story, Angel's story, was no longer about failure. It was about those who stayed, those who protected, and those who stepped forward when others couldn't. Michael thought the worst was over. But the Blackwoods' rich, relentless, and used to winning weren't done. Their latest tactic wasn't a donation or press release. It was surveillance. Private investigators followed Michael's every move, recorded his shifts, documented Guardian's routines. One even infiltrated the hospital disguised as a volunteer. And then the breach. An intruder posing as a medical transport officer tried to take Angel during a routine walk in the hospital garden. Only Guardian's growl, deep, primal, unignorable, had stopped him. The aftermath chilled Michael to his core. This wasn't a custody debate anymore. This was a threat. Detective Jenkins came to his apartment that evening. They're calling it a contingency extraction plan, she said. Voice low, eyes tired. They don't plan to wait for the courts. They plan to take her. Michael fortified everything. Advanced security systems. Trusted caretakers only. He even brought Angel and Guardian to the hospital during his shifts, hiding them in secure staff areas. It was absurd, a pediatrician turning his ward into a fortress, but not as absurd as letting them be taken. Meanwhile, Angel flourished. She giggled when Guardian licked her toes. She reached for light, for sound, for warmth. And when she cried, Guardian came first, always. Michael watched them together and saw something whole, something healed. Sarah's trial verdict approached like a slow-moving storm. The prosecutor called her reckless. The defense called her desperate. The city waited, and Michael held his breath. Not for the ruling, but for the question he still couldn't answer. What if they say she's unfit? What happens to Angel then? He looked to Guardian. She didn't flinch, didn't move. She simply laid her head next to the crib and closed her eyes, trusting still that someone would do what's right. The verdict came down on a rainy Thursday. The courtroom was packed. Protesters outside chanted for justice, for mercy, for change. Inside, silence thickened as the judge began. The charges were reduced. Sarah Mitchell was found guilty but spared prison. The court recognized her postpartum condition, her lack of support, and most of all, the deliberate act of placing the baby with the one creature she trusted to protect her. She was sentenced to supervised rehabilitation and counseling, with the possibility of regaining custody. Gasps, murmurs, outrage. But in Michael's chest, relief. Because this wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about possibility. Sarah cried in the hallway after the hearing. Not from fear, from hope. She would get a second chance. Not immediately, not easily, but one day. And Michael wouldn't stand in her way. He met her eyes as he handed Angel over for a brief visit. Guardian stood at his side tail, still eyes steady. "I'll keep them safe," he said quietly. Sarah nodded. "I know you will." Weeks passed. The Blackwoods disappeared from headlines. Their offers rejected their power, blunted by public disgust. Angel's name was no longer Jane Doe. And Michael. He filed paperwork for permanent guardianship, not to keep her, but to ensure that no one unworthy could take her away again, until Sarah was ready. One spring afternoon, Angel took her first wobbly step. She stumbled forward, not toward Michael, not toward her toys, but toward Guardian. The dog didn't move, just watched. And when Angel fell against her chest, giggling, Guardian leaned in and licked her cheek. It wasn't the end of the story, but it was the beginning of something real. Not a miracle, not a tragedy, just a dog who refused to leave a baby, who refused to die, and a man who somewhere in the middle of the snow and silence found a way back to life.